Now that we have set up Yewdux, let's go ahead and repeat that again to get some practice in. But this time we're going to store form data to our centralized store. It's important to practice actual form data because it's just slightly more complicated to extract the data out of each of those form elements and then get them in that store. Doing that and just repeating practice will help us be able to just work really fast when we have real applications that we're working on. Let's go ahead and create a login form. So just something that takes in a username and password and then stores those two things into our centralized store. All right, we'll start with installing Yewdux as before. Now I have my extension up, which tells me it's the crates extension. So I can go straight to cargo.toml and we're going to put in Yewdux and pull in the latest version. All right, we'll let Rust Analyzer reset for this, and that should give me Yewdux. Now, creating the store. So this is going to be an auth store. So let's go ahead and in our source, create a new folder, and I'm going to call this stores. Going to have our mod stores. Okay, that should make you happier. There we go. Oh, wait, maybe. There we go. Okay, so inside of here, we're going to want a, I'm going to call this an auth store. Mod auth store. And we're going to first start with that importing everything from Yewdux. So Yewdux, prelude star, and let's go ahead and set up well, we don't need to do the derive. I sometimes like to try to do the derives first, but I noticed that Rust Analyzer doesn't necessarily know what to pull in if it doesn't have the context that it's a struct. Let's go ahead and create our auth store here. So pub struct auth store. And we're going to have derive. All right, well, we're going to have a store. We're going to pull in default, partial equal, and clone. And that will allow us to do everything we need to do, including that reduce mute in the future. All right, things that we're going to be storing in here. Well, we want the username, and you're going to be a string, and we're going to also want a password. So that's also going to be a string. Okay. That should be good to go here. Now, default and username password is going to be, well, it's going to give us like, it's going to always put them in here. We don't necessarily always want them in here. Let's actually make these options. So option string. And the default for an option is going to be none. So that way we can keep the password in the store for as long as we really need it. Then we sort of get rid of it. Maybe we keep the username around, and we could put in a pub like is authenticated, and that could be a boolean. Boolean default is going to be false, so that's perfect. Okay. That will be our store that we create here. Now we need to create the form. So let's go ahead and create a auth form. S here. Mod auth form. Okay, so we're still in struct components. So we're going to do a use prelude star and then use Yewdux prelude star. I'm now, this time we're building out the thing that saves the data to the Yewdux centralized store first. Okay, so we're going to do a pub struct auth form. We do know that we need to keep in a dispatch here. So our dispatch is going to be a dispatched for the auth store. Impl component for auth form. Okay, type message. Well, we need to have that message that we had before. So we're going to have a pub enum msg. You're going to have a store, which is an RC with an auth store inside. And we're also going to have, so this is the auth form itself. So there's going to be two things here, right? We're going to have the username, the password, and then when we submit and attempt to log in. So username updated. So username. Now, do I care about anything else that's happening here? Well, I probably do. So let's do username is a string. We'll do a password, and we're going to pass that in with a string, and then is authentic, or maybe like login, which is just an event like that. Okay, so message, you are that MSG. Properties, we don't need you. Okay, create. Well, we first need to create that dispatch. So that dispatch equals dispatch. This is going to be the auth store. We're going to subscribe to the context link callback. It's MSG store. And then we're going to turn self with the dispatch inside of it. All right. And then let's skip the update for right now. Let's see if we can get everything, like at least something displaying to the screen as quickly as possible. So we're going to start with our HTML. We're going to start, we'll do a div. We can put a label in here. So we'll do a, not an H1 because it's probably not going to be the top thing on the page. So an H2. And this will be our login. So login. All right. So we need to create our form itself. I'm going to create a div for each of these. All right. So we're starting with just a username. So I'm thinking this is going to be a div for the entire username thing. So I'm going to create another div in here. And we're going to do a label. We're going to have 4 equals, and this is going to be an ID for this label. So we're going to call this username. I don't think I need necessarily anything else. And we are going to put in username. We're going to do another div. And this is actually going to be for the input itself. So input type equals, this is probably text. If your usernames are all emails, then that would be an email type here. We do need an ID, which is going to be this username. And we can have a placeholder of username as well. Okay. And that's the first form element. Let's duplicate this. And the next one is going to be for password. We do want to make sure that we change the type to type password. And then the final thing is another div. And we're going to put in a button here. So a button. And I just realized that I made a mistake. This div should really be a form. So that way it actually knows that this is all part of a single form here. So we're gonna convert that div into a form here. Button, and we're gonna have maybe login. Okay, that was a lot of typing. I don't need this context. Here, let's go ahead and, well, I'll leave these warnings for right now. We'll be using them shortly. Let's head back to our main library and we'll pull this in. So use Auth Form, and let's put this right underneath the H1 here. And head back over here. Okay, great. We have our app, we have login, we have our username and password. If I put in something here, it's like Brooks234 and hit login, everything just sort of refreshes. That's because when we hit the login button, it's attempting to do this in the browser and not letting us handle it in code. Okay, but first part is working here. So we now need to extract out, well, first of all, whenever we hit the login button, we need to stop that from refreshing. Okay, so stop it from refreshing. Well, that's easy enough. In our auth form, I need to create a on submit event handler. We're going to take in the event and we're going to cancel. We're just going to cancel, and then we're going to send the message login. So let's do let on submit equals, okay, so we do need this context. CTX link callback. I need this event. We're going to need to set up what that event is, but Rest Analyzer is going to help us out a little bit. So the first thing we're going to want to do here is say event.prevent. Well, actually, you're not really going to help me until I get the type set up. So let's do that really quickly. On submit. Now we know that this is a focus event. So let's go ahead and set that. You're a focus event. And now because of that, I can do event.prevent default. And you know exactly what that's supposed to do, or at least the browser does. Now it wants, at the end of this callback, it needs to have a message of what it's returning. So, well, on submit, we know we're going to be returning MSG login. This should really be a capital L. And there we go. Okay, so that, we come back to here whenever I hit this. Now, whenever I click the button, it doesn't cause the entire page to refresh. Okay, that's great, but we're not doing anything with username and password. My preference is usually as we change and fill out the form, we take that data and we put it into the centralized store. So we don't wait until the button is clicked. We start doing that ahead of time. And that, if we do have any kind of validation that we're running, we can do that at the time. So we could basically say like, oh, look, password changed. Let's go ahead and make sure the password matches whatever we feel it needs to match. Like it's not empty, or it's like, a minimum of X characters, or it has something else. We can do any kind of logic inside of there if we want to. Okay, so let's go ahead and set that up next. So we're going to send up username, and then we'll send up the password. So this is going to be username on change equals, okay, context link callback. We're going to have the event here. And we do care about this event. And let's go ahead and on the input, we're going to put our on change equals username on change, which tells us that you are now dot callback, please. Okay. There it goes. Now it sees, hey, this is just plain event. So let's give it that type here. And all right, so we need to extract out the string that's stored inside of this this input, which means we need to convert. We need to get the target and then convert it into the type that we expect. So we can do that. So let's do let target equals. We can do this using our WebSys and our WebSys. Specifically with this feature's HTML input element. That's what's going to get us the target here. So this is going to be event dot. We're going to do target unchecked into. We need this to be an HTML input element. And then if we just do that on its own, that should now give us exactly what we're looking for. And we can now get the value out of that. So we can now say, I want this to be username equals target.value. That is a function. And then we can now return MSG username and pass in the username. All right, so it doesn't yell at us. It should work. Let's go ahead and repeat this again for password. Okay, so we get our unchecked info. It's an HTML input element, even though the type is different. It's still an HTML input element. We're getting our password here and password here. Okay, and on this, we're going to say on change equals password on change. Okay, now we haven't actually stored this into the store yet. We're just sending messages to our own component here. So we now need to update that. So function update will match our SG. Okay, so first of all, when the store updates, do we care what happens? For this form, not really. So I'm just going to go ahead and say that false. We don't want to refresh at this time. Now, when the username updates, we're going to take username. And I definitely do. So I want to do a self.dispatch. No, not destroy. Self.dispatch. We want to, let's do the reduce mute. We're going to get the store. And I'm going to say store.username equals username. This, I do also need to return a false out of here. So I'm going to do this in a multi-line. And we're going to set you to be false. I don't really need to update this, this method itself. Now it's yelling at me because store.username is an option and this is a string. So we actually need to set this as a sum. Okay. When password logs in here. Okay. So in password, let's we'll take in our password, which is the string. We're going to do exactly the same thing. So we're going to do a self.dispatch. We're going to reduce mute. We're going to have the store. And we're going to say store.password equals some password. And we're also going to return a false here. We don't care about refreshing at this point in time. Now, login. So this is where we potentially could put any kind of form validation in here. Like when we attempt to log in, we really want to, we don't want to set that like is authenticated to be true unless we have both a password and a username set. Let's go ahead and double check that. To find out if we have them set, we can do our dispatch. Oh, we can also do the get to get the store, sort of like to check them. Let's just do this in a straight dispatch here. So we'll do a self.dispatch. We'll do a reduce mute. This is going to be our store, and I only want to change this if both of them. So let's do we'll do store dot is authenticated equals to. I just want store dot password is some and store dot username is some. Okay, if they're both set, then this becomes true. Okay, well that makes me happy about this. And then we're going to return false. I don't need this component to ever really update. And I don't need this context. All right, is there any other warnings? I accidentally brought in glue timers callback. I don't need that. This password string, well, why aren't you being used? So this one, username, try password, some password. If I'm not using you, that's a problem. So this password on change is because I'm sending in username. Well, that's a problem. Let's change that to password. All right. And that's why it's a good idea to look at your warnings just to make sure that you're not doing something silly like passing in a username as a password or password as a username. Okay, so I can now fill out everything in here. So we have our username and we have our password. And as soon as I click away, that fires the onChange event, which should store it in the store. And if I hit login, that should now flip that bit, but we need to display that. So let's go ahead and create a display auth. And this is just going to display the contents of the form and the contents of that store so we can know that things are doing what we expect them to do. Okay, so I'm going to do mod display auth. All right, so use prelude and use Yewdux prelude. Pub struct, this is display auth. We know we're going to want the dispatch, which is a dispatch with an auth store. Impl component for display auth. Impl component for display auth. There he goes. Impl those default members. Okay, we also need that pub enum msg. We need the store, and this is the only real change that we need in here. And you're going to be an RC with a auth store. Okay, message. You are MSG. Properties, don't need you. Okay, so create. Let dispatch equals dispatch. Our auth store. We want to subscribe. We're going to use the context link callback. I keep on doing call. I want call back. And then inside of here, MSG store. And then we can do our self dispatch. All right. We can do our update right now. We know exactly what we need to do for this. So on update, we want to match MSG. There's only one thing here. I still do like to do the matches for this, just in case I add new things. I feel like I like looking at the match in this update function as it were. Okay, so now this is telling me that I don't actually need these parentheses. Let's get rid of you. Okay. Then next up, we need to in the view. So, we're gonna want to grab out. Well, I guess like we need the store, don't we? So we need the auth store is gonna be equal to self.dispatch.get, which gets us the auth store, and then we can grab things out of there as we want to. All right, so HTML. Let's put in a div, and we're going to throw in an h2, and let's just title this as maybe like auth store. Like we want just the contents of it. All right, div. Inside of here, what do we have? Well, we're gonna have the username. Let's actually do this up here. We'll do username. It's gonna equal to, I just want to format this. And you're gonna be username colon, and I want authstore dot username. Now, interestingly, because this is an option, I want, let's go ahead and debug. I think that will be, actually, you know what? We're gonna do this. Unwrap our default. So if it's a none, it'll become an empty string. Otherwise, it'll be the actual string itself. Okay, so that's username, password equals another format, password. So auth store dot password unwrap or default. And then finally is authenticated. I'm just going to extract this out. So we'll just do auth store. Actually, you know what? I still want to do the format. I want to have a label for it. So auth store is authenticated. Now that's a Boolean, so I'm gonna debug view you. Okay, so now we're gonna put in a username. We'll do another div with password. And finally, another div with is authenticated. Okay, what are you yelling about? Cannot move out of the RC. So I don't want that. Options itself doesn't have the copy. I think I can use the as ref, or I could do as dref too, I believe. That might work. Do I do it there? I think so, yes. Let's do the same thing here. As dref. Okay, and I don't need this context. All right, so we have our display auth. Let's head back over here and use that. Display auth, display auth. And let's head over here and see. Okay, so we have our auth store. Username password is authenticated false. So if I put something in to our username and I click away, there we go. Our username gets set in the store. We don't have anything in password yet. So I put in the best password ever. Now we notice that is authenticated is still false. I hit login and it flips over to true. And so now we have authentication. We can now check is authenticated inside the store. If ever we want to like make sure we can display something to somebody who is authenticated or not, we can now know that. So let's do a really quick summary here, because I know this was a little bit long. We have created our store. It's exactly like the store we did, the counter store we did. It just, in this case, holds options and strings. So instead of just a number. So whatever type we want to put in here, we can just put that in here. For the form itself, we use the good old message pathing method for struct components to send the username to our callback. And then in update, we catch that username and then use the reduce mute on the dispatch to then update the store. In login, we're not catching any data, but we're checking the contents of the store to make sure like, hey, is everything exactly the way we want it to be before we then update that. And then finally, we display the contents of the store out and so that we can see what's going on. Display auth, obviously, we would not put that in there for the real application, but this is a great way for us to sort of display what's going on in our stores if necessary. And there we have it. We now have, I can mark all of these as done. All right. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.